Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The arrival of Zara ***. In the vast expanse of space, Earth had long been under the radar of extraterrestrial beings. Humanity was known but not studied extensively, until now. John, a mid-level engineer living a solitary life in a quiet suburban neighborhood, had never imagined his life would change in such an extraordinary way. He was a regular man with regular problems. But all that was about to change when a strange contract he signed out of curiosity delivered something far beyond his expectations. The contract promised an alien domestic assistant at an unbelievably low cost. It was a deal too strange to be true, yet the price was so low he couldn't resist. What John didn't know was that alien wasn't just a marketing term. The maid he'd been promised wasn't a humanoid robot or a genetic experiment from Earth. No, she was an actual extraterrestrial, and she had arrived at his door in a shimmering spacecraft, sleek and bright, unlike anything John had ever seen. When the doorbell rang, John hesitated, unsure if he had made a terrible mistake. When he opened the door, his breath caught in his throat. Standing before him was a woman, a tall, slender figure with skin that shimmered faintly in shades of violet and silver, eyes deep and luminous, reflecting the cosmos itself. Her appearance was both alluring and terrifying in its beauty. She wore a simple, flowing garment that seemed to shift in color with her movements. "Zara, your alien maid," she announced with a soft, melodic voice that sent chills down John's spine. Her accent was unfamiliar but oddly soothing. "I have been assigned to assist you in your daily tasks." John stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the reality of the situation. Alien? Maid? The very idea seemed absurd, but here she was, standing in his living room. Zara noticed his confusion and smiled gently. "I understand this is unexpected. Do not worry. I will not harm you. My mission is simply to serve." As John tried to gather his wits, he began to process her words. "Serve? You mean, like cleaning? Cooking?" Zara nodded gracefully. "I have knowledge of your planet's customs and can adapt to whatever tasks are needed. I've also been programmed with your preferences as per the contract." John shook his head in disbelief. "But you're not human. What kind of contract is this?" Zara's expression softened, and she stepped inside without waiting for permission. "The contract was a gift from my people. They believe that by fostering understanding between species, humanity can be more prepared for the future." Her gaze met his, and she paused as if considering something. "It's true that humans are not often seen as worthy of much attention. But your kind has potential. I am here to help." John tried to grasp the enormity of what she was saying. A strange mix of awe and anxiety filled him. Could it be true? Were aliens actually observing humanity? And why was he chosen for this strange help from an alien race? Without a word, Zara moved through the house as though she already knew the layout. John reluctantly followed her, his mind racing. She immediately set to work, her movements fluid and graceful, as though she had an innate understanding of how to make a space not just clean but perfect. She didn't touch anything the way a human would, yet her movements were efficient, her alien intellect making every task seem effortless. As Zara continued cleaning and tidying, John couldn't help but watch her, his curiosity growing by the minute. He noticed that her eyes occasionally flickered with something more than mere service, something hungry. It was as though she was studying him, every inch of his movements, every reaction. A slight shiver ran down his spine when he caught her staring at him from across the room. Her gaze was intense, almost predatory, but then she blinked and it was gone. Was it just his imagination? Was he overthinking it? Eventually he worked up the courage to speak. "I still don't understand. Why humans? Why me?" Zara paused, her hands hovering over a stack of papers. She tilted her head, her silver eyes glinting with something he couldn't name. "You misunderstand, John. My purpose is not just to serve you. I am here to observe and experience. Humans are fascinating." John frowned, taken aback. "Experience?" Zara turned, her movements fluid and graceful, drawing closer. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, like every step was measured, calculated, yet effortless. "Yes. I've been sent by my people to learn what it means to be human. To understand your desires, your emotions, and to feel them." There was a pause in the air, and John felt an unspoken weight between them. For the first time it hit him. This was no ordinary maid. Zara wasn't just cleaning his house, she was studying him. And in the depths of her eyes, there was something far darker, something alien that wasn't simply about helping him. Zara wasn't here to serve in the way he thought. She was here to consume. The realization hit him like a jolt of electricity. She was an alien. A being who didn't just want to clean and cook, but someone who was deeply fascinated by the human experience. Was it just curiosity, or was there something more insidious to her interest? As Zara continued to move around the house, John found himself caught in a strange mix of awe and unease. He wasn't sure what was going to happen next. But one thing was certain. Zara's hunger for humans went far beyond what he had imagined. The unexpected hunger ***. The days following Zara's arrival passed in a blur for John. Every time he walked into his home, it seemed as though she had already anticipated his needs. Meals were prepared, laundry folded, the floors gleaming with an almost unnatural shine. Zara moved through the house with an eerie fluidity, as if she had been living there for years rather than days. But there was something more unsettling than her uncanny ability to anticipate his every move, the way she observed him. John noticed it more and more. The lingering glances, the strange smiles, the subtle way she followed him with her eyes whenever he spoke. At first he had written it off as a cultural difference or maybe an alien quirk, but soon it became impossible to ignore. Zara was fascinated by him, **2* fascinated. He had to admit she was captivating. Her beauty was otherworldly, almost ethereal. Her violet-silver skin shimmered under the light, and her eyes, deep and endless like the cosmos, seemed to see through him. There was an intensity in her gaze, a hunger that he couldn't quite place. She would ask him questions about human emotions, about feelings like love, fear, and desire, always seeming so genuine in her curiosity. But there was something else, something darker lurking beneath her words. She had told him, quite plainly, that she was there to experience humanity, to feel what it was like to be human. John's initial unease had only grown since then. One evening, as John sat on the couch watching television, Zara entered the room with a tray of food. She had prepared his favorite meal, but as she set it down in front of him, she lingered a moment too long. Her eyes were fixed on him, her gaze intense, and John could swear he saw something flicker in the depths of them, a flash of something primal. The air between them felt charged electric. "You seem distracted, John," Zara said, her voice smooth like silk. "Are you not enjoying your meal?" John shook his head, trying to dismiss the unease creeping into his chest. "No, it's great. Thank you." Zara's smile widened. "I am happy to serve." But there was something different in her tone. She spoke as if the word served held a double meaning, like it was a command, not just a simple statement. The realization struck him with sudden clarity. Zara wasn't just studying him as a human, she was studying him as a source of something. Something she desired. The hunger was unmistakable now. But it wasn't just for food. Later that night, after John had finished his meal, Zara sat across from him, folding her long fingers in her lap. Her eyes never left him, her gaze intense and probing. "Tell me, John," she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper, "what does it feel like to want? To desire something deeply?" John shifted uncomfortably. "I guess it's like a yearning. A pull toward something or someone. You can't stop thinking about it and it drives you to act on it." Zara nodded slowly as if savoring the sound of his words. "And does this desire feel good? Or does it burn?" John hesitated, the question throwing him off guard. He wasn't sure how to answer, but Zara's unwavering gaze made it hard to look away. There was a tension in the air, thick and palpable. It wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was a game. And Zara was the predator and he was the prey. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. "I suppose it can feel both good and bad. Desire is powerful. It can lead to great things, but it can also hurt." Zara's smile deepened, but it wasn't reassuring. "And what if you couldn't control it? What if that desire overtook you completely?" John frowned, confused by the direction the conversation was taking. "What do you mean? If you can't control desire, then it becomes obsession, and that's dangerous." She leaned forward, her eyes glinting with something almost hungry. "And what if you couldn't stop yourself, John? What if you couldn't resist the pull of that obsession?" John felt a chill run down his spine. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, and for a moment he felt as though he were drowning in Zara's gaze. There was no escape, no way to turn away from her piercing attention. He didn't know why, but the question unsettled him more than it should have. Before he could answer, Zara stood abruptly, her movements swift and graceful. "I have much to learn about human desire," she said, her voice low and almost sensual. "And I think you have much to teach me." John watched as she disappeared into the kitchen, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a dark cloud. He didn't understand what she was asking, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Zara wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just here to clean and cook, she was here for something far more personal. The following days felt like a strange dream. Zara's behavior became more erratic, more unpredictable. She would hover around him, always just a little too close, her presence suffocating. Whenever he tried to distance himself, she would find a reason to be near him again. Her questions about human emotions grew deeper, more probing, as if she were searching for something specific. One afternoon, as John was working at his desk, Zara entered the room without knocking. He looked up, startled, but didn't have time to say anything before she spoke. "John, I need your help," she said, her tone unusually serious. "There's something I don't understand." John frowned, pushing his chair back. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Zara's eyes locked onto his. "I've been studying you, John. Studying humanity. But I'm beginning to realize that I don't just want to learn. I want to feel it. I want to understand it completely. I need you to help me experience human desire in the most intimate way." John's heart raced, a cold shiver running down his spine. The words she spoke were so calm, so matter-of-fact, yet they held a weight that he couldn't ignore. "Zara," he started, his voice trembling, "I don't think I understand what you mean. This isn't normal. You can't just—" Zara stepped forward, her violet eyes gleaming with an intensity that left him speechless. "Don't you see, John?" she whispered. "I'm not just an alien. I'm something more. Something that needs to feed, to experience. And you are my key." The room grew colder as her words settled in. Zara's hunger was not just for knowledge or experience, it was for him. And John realized, with a creeping sense of terror, that he was in far more danger than he had ever imagined. The hunger unleashed ***. John stumbled back, his mind racing. The words Zara had spoken echoed in his head, replaying over and over, each one heavier than the last. "You are my key." The words made his skin prickle, the air around him thick with an unnatural tension. What had he gotten himself into? She was no ordinary maid. Zara was something else. Something alien. His first instinct was to push her away, to make her leave his home and never return. But a strange part of him, curiosity perhaps or something darker, held him in place. Zara's presence was magnetic, almost hypnotic. It was as though his body was under her control, and no matter how much he wanted to escape, his legs refused to move. Zara stood before him, her gaze unwavering, and John couldn't shake the feeling that she was studying him, not just with her eyes, but with every fiber of her being. The hunger in her eyes was undeniable now, a hunger that went beyond mere curiosity. It was something deeper, more primal, and he couldn't deny that it unsettled him. "I don't understand," John managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from me?" Zara's smile deepened, though it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile that was both alluring and chilling. "I want to understand what it feels like to need, to desire, to consume." The word sent a shock through him. Consume? His heart raced and he took another step back. "Are you threatening me?" She shook her head, her long silver hair swishing as she did. "No, John. I am offering you an experience unlike anything you've ever known. You will understand your desires in ways you cannot yet imagine. You will feel everything, and you will not be able to turn away." John felt his breath quicken, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. There was something in her tone, something in the way she spoke, that told him this wasn't just about exploration or knowledge. Zara wasn't here to learn about humanity. She was here to consume it, to feed on the very essence of human desire, and he was the vessel for it. "I can't do this," John said, his voice shaking. "This isn't what I signed up for. I didn't agree to, whatever this is." Zara stepped closer, her movements smooth and fluid, almost too graceful for a human. "I understand your hesitation, John. But you do not yet comprehend the depth of your own desires. They lie dormant within you, waiting to be awakened." Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "You can't resist the pull. You will give in." John took another step back, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to make sense of the situation. Zara was no ordinary maid. She was something far more dangerous. And yet, he couldn't seem to tear himself away from her. His pulse hammered in his chest as a mix of fear and something else, something he didn't want to acknowledge, flooded his senses. "You're not like anything I've ever seen," he said, his voice almost breathless. "What are you?" Zara's expression softened, a slight flicker of amusement crossing her face. "I am from a distant world, John. A world where desire is not simply a fleeting emotion. It is a need. A necessity. My people have learned to feed off of it, to draw power from the raw energy of emotion. And I need you to help me understand it. John's mind raced to make sense of her words. He could feel the weight of her gaze as it pierced through him, the pull of her presence almost magnetic. She was feeding on him, on his emotions, and the more he resisted, the stronger her hunger became. I can't be part of this, John said, his voice stronger now, though the fear still clung to him. You can't just consume people. Zara's eyes darkened and her smile faded, replaced by something far more intense, almost predatory. You misunderstand. I do not consume people in the way you think. I feed on desire, John. It is the very essence of what makes you human. You cannot hide it from me. The room grew colder, the air charged with an electric hum as Zara took another step toward him. Her eyes glinted with a knowing look, as if she could see through every defense he had built. You cannot escape what you are, John. You are full of desire. You've just never learned to truly feel it. John's heart hammered in his chest as Zara reached out, her hand brushing against his arm. The contact sent a jolt of heat through him and he quickly pulled away, his breath coming faster. There was again, that strange pull. That hunger in her eyes that made him feel like he was at her mercy. Please, John said, desperation creeping into his voice. Just leave. I don't want any part of this. Zara didn't answer at first. She simply stood there, watching him with an unreadable expression. Then finally she spoke, her voice softer now, though still laced with something dark. You don't have to fear me, John. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help you understand yourself. Your own desires. To awaken something inside you that you didn't even know was there. She reached for him again, her fingers lightly grazing his skin. Give in. Let go. Let me show you the truth. John's mind screamed at him to run, to escape, to shut her out. But his body betrayed him. There was something in her touch, something hypnotic in the way she spoke, that made it impossible to break free. His body responded to her, a warmth spreading through him that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zara's eyes darkened further and she leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear. Because, John, I need you. I need to understand the depths of what makes you human. What drives you. What makes you want. Her words were laced with something far more primal now. And once I've tasted that, I will know you completely. The air between them crackled, and John felt an overwhelming wave of emotion rise in his chest. It was as though Zara was pulling something from him, something buried deep inside. Fear. Desire. A need he hadn't fully understood until now. For the first time, John realized that he wasn't in control. Zara had taken that from him whether he liked it or not. She had unlocked something inside him, something dark and dangerous. The hunger in her eyes was real, and now he could feel it in himself too. The room seemed to close in around him as Zara's presence became all-consuming. He was trapped, caught in her gaze, caught in her hunger. He couldn't escape. And, perhaps more terrifying still, a part of him didn't want to. Please, he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was begging anymore. Don't do this. Zara's lips curled into a smile, and for a moment, the hunger in her eyes softened, replaced with something far more dangerous, satisfaction. It's too late, John. You already have. And with that, the darkness fully enveloped him. The power of desire ***. John's mind felt like it was unraveling as Zara's words echoed in his ears. You already have. The realization was a cold rush. Zara wasn't just an alien maid with an insatiable curiosity. She was feeding off him. She had unlocked something inside him that he wasn't sure he wanted to explore. And now, more than ever, he felt completely at her mercy. Zara stepped back, her eyes still locked onto his with that unnerving intensity. The room seemed to spin around him, his thoughts clouded. She hadn't touched him in a way that was purely physical, but her presence alone was enough to make his pulse race and his thoughts scatter. He couldn't think clearly. Every fiber of his being was drawn to her, even as his mind screamed to break free. I don't understand, John muttered, his voice hoarse. What are you doing to me? Zara smiled, her lips curling with satisfaction as she watched the struggle in his eyes. I am helping you, John. I'm awakening something in you. Something you've been suppressing all your life. She took another step forward, her movements smooth and deliberate. Desire. It's not just an emotion. It's power. The kind of power that changes you. That makes you realize who you truly are. John's breath caught in his throat as she approached. His legs trembled and he took an instinctive step back. The feeling inside him was growing, something dark, something dangerous that he didn't know how to control. He could feel the heat radiating off Zara, as though she was drawing him in with her mere presence. It was no longer just her hunger for knowledge or power that frightened him, it was the way she had begun to shape him. Zara's voice was soft, almost coaxing. Humans are so afraid of desire. You hide it, bury it deep, afraid of what it might do to you. But it's there, John. And I am here to help you embrace it. Defeat it? John's mind swirled in a haze of confusion and fear. This wasn't what he had imagined when he signed that strange contract. He had thought she would be an assistant, someone to help with menial tasks. But she was something far more complex, far more dangerous. Zara wasn't here just to learn about humans, she was here to consume their very essence. And now, with every word, she was drawing him further into her world, one he wasn't sure he wanted to be a part of. I don't want this, he whispered, shaking his head. But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't entirely true. There was a part of him, deep down, hidden away, that was curious, that wanted to know more. His thoughts were muddled and he couldn't escape the pull she had on him. Zara tilted her head, studying him with a look that was almost affectionate, though the hunger in her eyes never wavered. You say that now, John, but deep down you do want this. You just don't understand it yet. You haven't felt what it's like to truly give in, to let your desires consume you. But I will help you understand. I will guide you. John's heart raced as Zara closed the distance between them. Her movements were fluid, mesmerizing. She reached out, her hand brushing his arm, and this time he didn't pull away. The sensation was electric, sending a wave of warmth through his body. He couldn't deny it, her touch felt good. He hated that it felt good, but there it was. The truth was undeniable. You see, John, Zara continued, her voice a low, hypnotic murmur, desire is more than just an impulse. It's an energy, a force that flows through all of us. It drives us to seek, to need, to consume. And right now, I'm feeding on that energy. But you, John, you're not just the source. You're the catalyst. With you, I can feel it all, the rush, the power, the intensity. John's pulse raced, his breath shallow as Zara's hand moved higher up his arm, her fingers trailing lightly across his skin. It felt as though every nerve in his body was alive, pulsing with her touch. He could feel the desire within him, something raw and untamed, rising up to meet hers. The realization hit him hard. Zara had been right. He had been suppressing it all this time. His own desires, his own needs had been buried under layers of control. But now they were surfacing, breaking free. And Zara was the one pulling them out of him. The thought terrified him. He had always prided himself on being rational, in control. He was a man of logic and reason. But Zara's influence, her alien presence, was dismantling that control piece by piece. He could no longer deny that he wanted her. He wanted to understand what it would feel like to give in to the hunger that she had awakened in him. Zara, he said, his voice shaking, what do you want from me? What happens if I give in? Her eyes glinted with satisfaction and she stepped closer, so close that he could feel the heat of her body against his. I want everything, John. I want you to embrace your desires, to feel them without restraint. I want you to let go, to stop pretending that you're not as hungry as I am. Her breath was warm against his ear as she whispered, when you give in, John, you'll feel alive in ways you never imagined. You'll see that there is more to life than simply existing. Desire is what makes you human. And it is what makes you strong. John's knees buckled as the weight of her words pressed down on him. He was on the verge of something he couldn't turn back from. It felt like he was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and Zara was the wind beneath his wings, pushing him closer to the abyss. He reached out instinctively, his hands gripping her arms, pulling her toward him. His breath came in ragged gasps as their faces were mere inches apart. Zara's eyes were filled with something dark and knowing, but there was a softness in her expression now, as though she were guiding him into something new, something dangerous. You will give in, John, she said, her voice a whisper of seduction. You're already starting to. You can't resist it. You need this. His heart pounded in his chest as he gazed into her eyes, feeling an overwhelming sense of want, of need, swelling inside him. He was no longer sure if it was her words that were affecting him or if it was something deeper, something buried inside that he had never let see the light of day. The pull of desire was too strong and he could no longer deny it. I can't. I don't know if I can stop, he admitted, his voice barely audible. Zara smiled, her lips curving with satisfaction. You don't need to stop, John. You never did. And with that she kissed him. The kiss was electric, a spark that ignited something deep within him. Every nerve in his body seemed to catch fire as Zara's presence enveloped him. He felt her hunger, her need, flood through him. It was overwhelming, all-consuming. And for the first time in his life, John stopped resisting. He gave in. And in that moment he felt it, the power of desire coursing through his veins, awakening parts of him that he had never known existed. Zara had shown him what it meant to truly want. And now there was no going back. The descent into desire ***. John could feel the world slipping away as Zara's kiss deepened. His body reacted instinctively, his hands sliding up her back, pulling her closer, unable to stop himself. There was no longer any resistance within him, just a need that consumed him entirely, an overwhelming craving that felt more powerful than anything he had ever known. He could feel Zara's hunger, her desire, echoing through him, intertwining with his own. Her touch was intoxicating, every movement a delicate dance of seduction and power. As they parted briefly, John's breath was ragged, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind felt hazy, clouded by the raw intensity of the emotions coursing through him. His thoughts were disjointed, fragments of understanding slipping through his fingers like sand. But one thing was clear. Zara had awakened something in him that he couldn't ignore. Zara's voice, soft and coaxing, broke through the fog in his mind. "Do you feel it, John? The fire burning inside you? That hunger? The need to consume? To want without limits?" John nodded, his throat tight, unable to form words. Every fiber of his being screamed in agreement. He wanted more. Wanted her. Wanted everything she was offering. The boundaries that had once kept him grounded, rational, were now distant memories. All that remained was this overwhelming, primal force inside him. Zara's eyes shimmered with approval as she traced a finger along his jawline, her touch almost tender. "You're starting to understand, aren't you? This is what it means to truly live, John. To stop pretending you're not hungry. To embrace that hunger, to let it define you." Her words sank deep into his consciousness, and for the first time he realized how much of his life he had spent suppressing his desires, his real, raw needs. He had always tried to maintain control, to keep himself in check, convinced that his life would be better if he didn't give in to those impulses. But now he understood. He wasn't just human because of his thoughts, his logic, or his actions. He was human because of this, the hunger, the need to want, the need to be desired and to consume. Zara moved closer again, her lips brushing against his ear, her breath warm and tantalizing. "You are mine now, John. Your desires belong to me. And once you let go, once you stop fighting it, I'll show you the true extent of your power." John's pulse spiked. A sense of fear gripped him, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the magnetic pull of Zara's presence. She was more than just a temptation now. She was a force of nature, and he was powerless against it. He wanted to resist, to break free, but every instinct in his body told him to give in, to let her have control. His hands moved on their own, tracing the contours of her body, feeling the warmth of her skin, the smoothness of her form. Zara's own hands roamed over him, exploring, marking him in ways that left him breathless. The way she touched him made him feel alive in a way he had never experienced, as though every nerve in his body was on fire. "I don't know if I can stop," John admitted, his voice raw, filled with desire. His words were a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He was standing on the edge of something profound, something terrifying, and yet he couldn't pull back. He was too far gone. Zara smiled, her lips curving with satisfaction. "You don't need to stop, John. You never did." The words echoed in his mind, reverberating in the darkest corners of his thoughts. She had been right all along. He had never needed to resist. Desire wasn't something to be feared or suppressed. It was something to be embraced, something to be experienced. Zara had shown him that. She had opened the door, and now he was falling through, unable to stop himself. As their bodies pressed together, John felt his mind unraveling even further. Zara was not just feeding on his desire, she was amplifying it, making it grow, turning it into something explosive, something overwhelming. Every touch, every kiss, every moment they spent together seemed to strip away more of his control, until he was left with nothing but raw need. Zara's fingers traced down his chest, lingering over the rapid beat of his heart, her touch sending jolts of electricity through his body. "Feel it, John. Feel the power of desire. You're no longer the man you once were. You're something more. Something greater. You are mine to shape, to mold, to consume." Her words stirred something deep within him. He had been human, but now he was something else. A part of him resisted the thought, but it was weak, fading away in the face of the overwhelming need that Zara had awakened in him. Desire was power. It was freedom. It was the one thing that could strip away everything else and leave him bare, vulnerable, yet stronger than ever before. "You belong to me now," Zara whispered, her voice a silken promise. And together we will explore everything this power can give us. John's chest tightened as he looked into Zara's eyes. The hunger in them was palpable, but there was something else there too, a depth of understanding, of connection that he hadn't expected. She wasn't just taking from him. She was giving him something too. A new way to see the world, to understand himself. She was showing him what it truly meant to live. But as the darkness began to take hold, as the power of desire spread through him, a single thought flickered in the back of his mind, a thought that terrified him more than anything else. He wasn't just becoming a part of Zara's world. He was becoming dependent on it, on her. She had promised him power, freedom, and awakening. But at what cost? Zara, he breathed, his voice strained. What happens when I can't stop? When the hunger takes everything from me? Zara paused, her eyes softening for a moment, as if she were considering his question with a tenderness that seemed out of place given the intensity of the situation. Then with a slow smile she replied, "That's the beauty of it, John. You'll never want to stop. Desire doesn't take from you. It gives you everything you've ever wanted." John felt the weight of her words, and for a moment the fear began to dissolve. Desire didn't take, it gave. It wasn't something to be feared, but something to be embraced. The more he let go, the more power he would feel. But even as that thought lingered in his mind, another one surfaced. A warning, a flicker of caution. Was he truly in control anymore? Or was he simply a vessel for Zara's insatiable hunger, a pawn in a game he didn't fully understand? Before he could process the thought any further, Zara pulled him back into her embrace, her lips crashing against his with renewed intensity. The hunger, the need, surged through him once more, drowning out everything else. There was no room for fear, for doubt. Only desire remained. And in that moment, John knew one thing for sure. He was no longer the man he had once been. He was Zara's now, just as she was his. Together, they would explore the depths of the hunger that had bound them. There was no going back. Desire had claimed them both. Bound by hunger ***. John was no longer sure where he ended and Zara began. The lines between them had blurred, the hunger that had once felt like a stranger now a part of him, coursing through his veins. Every touch, every glance, every word exchanged between them felt like an invitation to something deeper, something more intense. And despite the fear that had initially gripped him, despite the warnings that lingered in the back of his mind, he couldn't bring himself to stop. Zara had unlocked something inside him, something he had long suppressed, and now it seemed that nothing could quell the fire she had ignited. The desire that burned between them was no longer just an attraction. It was a force, a power that threatened to consume everything in its path. They had spent hours, maybe longer, lost in each other's presence. The house, once a sanctuary of ordinary life, now felt like a distant memory. Time itself seemed irrelevant as they explored the depths of the connection between them. Every kiss, every whispered word, was a journey deeper into a world of craving and need. But with each passing moment, something in John began to shift. The hunger was no longer just a shared bond between them. It was taking on a life of its own, filling his thoughts, his every action. He found himself craving Zara's touch more than ever, and it wasn't just physical anymore. It was as though her presence alone was enough to feed a void within him, a void he hadn't even known existed until now. Zara too seemed to be affected. Her hunger for him had only grown stronger, but there was something more, an awareness, a recognition that they were not simply two beings caught in a dance of desire. They were bound now, intertwined in a way that neither of them could escape. The connection between them was deeper than just physical. It was spiritual, almost primal. John had begun to see Zara in a new light. She was not just an alien maid or a being of curiosity anymore. She was a force, a living embodiment of the very hunger she had taught him to embrace. Her strength, her power, was intoxicating, and as much as he felt himself falling into her orbit, he knew that he was giving something up in return. The more he allowed himself to be consumed by her, the more he lost pieces of himself. And yet he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Zara was on the bed now, her legs stretched out, her body relaxed but still exuding an almost magnetic allure. John stood beside the bed, watching her with a mix of fascination and wariness. He could feel the heat radiating off her, the quiet, powerful pull that beckoned him closer. The hunger was still there, just beneath the surface, waiting to consume him once again. "You look lost," Zara said softly, her eyes glinting with knowing amusement. "But I can feel it, John. You're not lost at all. You've already surrendered." John swallowed, his throat dry. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The words tasted like betrayal, like he was confessing to a crime, but they were true. He had never been in control of this, not since the moment she'd first awakened that hunger inside him. Now it was too late. Zara's lips curved into a slow smile and she sat up, moving toward him with a predatory grace. "You don't need to stop, John," she whispered, her voice a gentle caress that sent a shiver down his spine. "Desire doesn't stop. It grows, it evolves, and it takes you places you never thought you'd go." She reached out, her fingers brushing against his chest, tracing the outline of his heartbeat. He could feel her touch seeping through him, feeding into his own growing need, amplifying the hunger inside him until it became an overwhelming presence. He wanted to push her away to gain control again, but every fiber of his being screamed to stay. John's mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts, but Zara's touch silenced them. Her hands slid up his arms, her fingers tracing delicate patterns over his skin. It felt as though she was marking him, claiming him in ways that went beyond the physical. "Do you know what happens when you let yourself go, John?" Zara's voice was a low murmur, barely audible, but her words sent a jolt of anticipation through him. "When you let the hunger take over completely?" John shook his head, his mouth dry. He was afraid to know the answer. But Zara didn't wait for him to respond. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them, and pressed herself against him, her body heat radiating through him like a furnace. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her breath warm against his ear. "The power? The strength? You are becoming something more than you ever were before. With me, John, you can be everything you've ever wanted." Her words sank deep into his consciousness, resonating with a truth he hadn't fully understood until now. He had been living in the shadows of his own desires, suppressing them, convinced they were something to be ashamed of. But now, with Zara, those desires were being brought to life. He didn't need to be afraid of them anymore. He needed to embrace them. Zara pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her gaze intense, searching. "You're becoming part of something greater." "And she stopped, her voice turning almost reverent. "I've never felt anything like this before. You're changing, John. You're evolving just as I hoped." John felt a thrill run through him, but it was tinged with fear. He was no longer the man he had been. Zara was right. He had surrendered to the hunger, and now it was taking over. And in that surrender he had become something else, something stronger, something more dangerous. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment he saw something flicker in her expression. Something like admiration, but also something darker, more consuming. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his throat tight. Zara smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Now we take the next step. You're ready to dive deeper, to give yourself fully. I've shown you how powerful desire can be, how it can transform you. But it's not just me you're becoming bound to, John. You're bound to your own hunger now. And once you've embraced it, there will be no going back." John's breath caught in his throat as the realization hit him. He wasn't just falling deeper into Zara's orbit. He was falling deeper into his own desires. And once that hunger had taken root, it would never let go. The thought terrified him, but it also thrilled him in ways he couldn't explain. The hunger that had once been a force he feared was now a part of him, a part of his very being. And there was no turning back. Zara closed the gap between them again, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that was gentle at first, but quickly deepened, becoming more urgent, more possessive. She pulled him closer, her hands threading through his hair, and John couldn't resist. He was already too far gone. As their bodies collided, as the hunger between them grew, John felt the final walls of his old self crumble. He was no longer just a man. He was a vessel for desire, a slave to the hunger that Zara had awakened in him. And in that moment he realized that the hunger was all that mattered now. The hunger had taken everything else, and in return, it had given him everything he never knew he needed. Zara was right. There was no going back. The journey had only just begun. The final awakening ***. John's world had shifted beyond recognition. What had started as curiosity, as an unexpected encounter with an alien maid, had blossomed into something far greater. Something more primal, more powerful than he had ever imagined. Zara's hunger had consumed him, reshaped him, and now, as he stood at the precipice of this new existence, he could feel it. The final pull, the complete loss of who he had once been. They were sitting together on the floor, Zara nestled against his chest, her hair falling in soft waves around them. Her touch was still searing, but there was an undeniable warmth to it now. The hunger had subsided for the moment, but only temporarily. John could feel it, coiled deep within him, like a beast waiting to be unleashed. He was no longer just a man but something else, something untamed. Zara lifted her head, her dark eyes meeting his, and he saw a glimmer of satisfaction there. She knew what was happening. She had seen it before. He was transforming, evolving into something far greater than he could have ever been on his own. "You've done well, John," Zara said softly, her voice carrying a weight of approval that made his chest swell with pride. "You've embraced the hunger. You've surrendered to it." John's hands, now restless and eager, moved to her waist. He could feel the subtle shift in himself, the urge to press further, to delve deeper into the hunger that seemed to define him now. It was a constant, pulsing ache, and it no longer frightened him. Instead, it had become an essential part of him, like an insatiable thirst that he could never quite quench. "I'm not the same," John admitted, his voice low and rough, still adjusting to the new power coursing through him. His gaze never left Zara, but his mind was full of questions. What did it mean now to be this? To no longer belong to the limits of his former life? Zara placed a finger gently against his lips, silencing his thoughts, and a smile curved at the corner of her mouth. "No, you're not. And you never will be again. That's the beauty of it. You've become something far beyond what you were, a being of pure desire. The hunger has taken root in you and it will never let go." Her words sent a shiver of understanding through him. She was right. He had surrendered, had given up the parts of him that resisted. The fear, the hesitation, gone. Now there was only this ever-present need to crave and to consume. He could feel it not only within himself but in the air around him. The world had changed. Or perhaps it was him who had changed. Zara stood and extended her hand, her gaze never leaving his. "Come with me. There's one last step, John. The final awakening. The moment when the hunger will not just guide you but consume you completely. It will be your birthright. Your true form." He took her hand without hesitation, his pulse quickening. His mind raced, but the desire pulsed louder in his chest, drowning out every other thought. As they walked through the house, John felt an eerie calm settle over him, the walls around him no longer barriers but simply the backdrop for something far greater. They stopped before a large, ornate mirror, its surface swirling with strange, iridescent patterns. Zara turned to face him, her expression solemn. "This is it," she said. "The moment when you fully embrace who you are, who you've become. You'll never look back after this, John." John stood before the mirror, his reflection staring back at him. For the first time since meeting Zara, he felt completely unmoored from his former life. The person he had been seemed like a distant memory, a shadow that no longer had any power over him. Instead, the man in the mirror, this new, unfamiliar version of him, was someone filled with strength, with a hunger that could never be sated. Zara stepped behind him, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. "Look closely, John. This is who you are now. You were always destined for this. The hunger was always a part of you, just waiting to be awakened." As her hands slid down his arms, John saw it in the mirror. The subtle shifts in his appearance, his features more intense, his eyes glowing with an inner fire. His skin tingled as though 1,000 unseen threads were weaving themselves through his being, binding him to something greater than himself. A strange sense of exhilaration surged through him, mingling with the hunger that seemed to pulse in his veins. This was it, the final step. The point of no return. And yet he felt no fear. Only anticipation. His reflection in the mirror shifted again, and this time he saw what Zara had meant. It wasn't just his physical form that had changed, it was something deeper. The hunger had become his essence, his identity. His body, his mind, all of it had fused with this new power, this unrelenting desire. It was like he had shed his old self entirely, stepping into something raw, untamed. Zara's voice was soft, but it resonated deep within him. "You are free now, John. Free from the constraints of the past. No longer held back by your old fears, your old doubts. You are pure hunger, pure desire. And now you are ready to claim what is yours." She stepped closer, her hands gliding over his body, her touch electric. John could feel the same hunger surging within her as well, her own desire mixing with his in a way that felt like an all-consuming wave. Together they were unstoppable. The mirror shimmered once more, and the reflections of the two of them, bound by the same hunger, merged into one. John no longer recognized the man he had been. He wasn't even sure if that man still existed. All that remained was this new being, a creature of fire and desire, born from the union of his own yearning and Zara's guidance. The air around them seemed to hum, as though the universe itself acknowledged this transformation. There was no going back now. This was who he was always meant to be. His body, his mind, everything was now attuned to this one singular purpose: to consume, to crave, to embrace the endless hunger that flowed within him. Zara's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, he felt a strange clarity. He understood now. He had feared the hunger before, feared what it might do to him, but now, in the presence of Zara, his guide, his counterpart, he understood its true power. The hunger wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was what had made him human in the first place. But it was more than that. It had made him more. "You're ready now," Zara whispered, her lips brushing against his ear. "Together we'll explore this world, and all others, through the power of desire. Through the hunger that defines us." John nodded, his breath steady despite the maelstrom inside him. He was ready. Ready to embrace this new existence. The hunger no longer felt like a curse. It was freedom. It was strength. And as the final echoes of his transformation reverberated through his being, John knew there was no turning back. His hunger was no longer a passing sensation. It was his essence, and with it he was unstoppable. Zara stepped back, her hand still resting gently on his arm. Together, they turned from the mirror, ready to face a future where their hunger would reign supreme. The world was theirs for the taking. And they would take it all. As John stood at the precipice of his new existence, with the hunger now a permanent fixture within him, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder at what he had become. No longer a simple man, confined by the limitations of his old life, he was something more, something untamed, something primal. And with Zara beside him, they were a force that could not be denied. The desire that had once consumed him now felt like an insatiable power, one that would only continue to grow as they ventured further into the unknown. Zara's gaze never left him as they walked away from the mirror. The room, the house, everything felt different now, as though it no longer mattered. The world outside, once familiar and comforting, was now a landscape to be conquered, a world filled with possibilities for them to claim. "You feel it, don't you?" Zara's voice was low and husky, her words sending a thrill through his body. "The power that comes with embracing the hunger fully. It's in every fiber of your being now, just like it is in mine. We're not bound by anything anymore, John. The universe is ours to take." John nodded, the words she spoke resonating with every part of him. The hunger inside him had grown stronger, more vibrant, and with it came an undeniable sense of purpose. It wasn't just about the desire, about the longing that had been awakened. It was about something far greater, a sense of control, of power. With Zara by his side, he knew they could do anything. They were no longer victims of circumstance, they were masters of their own fate. "We've only scratched the surface," Zara continued, her voice soft but with an unmistakable authority. "The true extent of our power hasn't even been realized yet. The hunger that flows through us, it can take us anywhere. Across worlds. Into realms that most beings could only dream of. Together we can reach the highest peaks of existence, where no one else can follow." John's heart raced as he took in her words. The thought of exploring new worlds, new possibilities, was thrilling. Before meeting Zara, he had been content with the mundane, with the life he had known. But now, as they stood on the edge of this transformation, he understood that he had been living in a cage, unaware of the vastness of what was possible. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with the excitement of someone about to embark on an unknown adventure. Zara's lips curled into a smile, one that spoke of secrets, of experiences yet to come. "Now we take what's ours. We claim our place in the cosmos, John. No one will stand in our way. The hunger that binds us, it's not just a force of desire. It's a weapon, a tool, a means to achieve anything we want." John turned toward her, his gaze intense. He could feel the bond between them now, deep and unbreakable. He had never truly understood what Zara had meant when she spoke of the hunger. At first it had been a foreign concept, a strange and unsettling thing. But now he knew. The hunger wasn't just something to feed. It was something to wield. It was a power they could control, one that would allow them to shape their destiny. Zara stepped closer to him, her breath hot against his ear. "We'll start small," she whispered. "We'll explore the limits of our new power, learn how to bend reality to our will. And when we're ready, when we've grown strong enough, we'll take everything. We'll conquer the very fabric of existence." John felt a chill of anticipation run through him at her words. The idea of conquering, of shaping the universe with nothing but their will, was intoxicating. His body thrummed with the potential, the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Zara's fingers traced a slow line down his chest, her touch sending a jolt of energy through him. "There's a place I know. A hidden world, untouched by the hands of lesser beings. It's a place of power, John. A place where our hunger can grow even stronger. But we can't go there until we're ready. until we've fully embraced what we've become. John's heart beat faster at the mention of this hidden world. He knew this was more than just a promise, it was a test, an opportunity to prove that they were worthy of the power they sought. What do we need to do to prepare? Zara smiled again, her eyes gleaming with the same hunger that burned within him. We need to focus, to master the hunger that lives inside us. Only then will we be able to harness it, to control it completely. We can't allow it to rule us. We need to learn how to make it work for us, to use it as a tool of creation, not destruction. John nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. He had felt the hunger take control before, had experienced what it was like to be consumed by it. But he understood now that he couldn't let that happen again. He had to learn to master it, to make it an extension of his will. I'm ready, he said, his voice firm with determination. Show me what to do. Zara's smile widened and she took a step back, her eyes scanning him as if appraising him. Very well. The first step is to focus on your senses. Feel the hunger as it flows through you, like a current of energy. Let it surge, but don't let it control you. Channel it. Use it to enhance your awareness of everything around you. John closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as he centered himself. He could feel it, the hunger deep within him, a swirling, pulsing force. At first, it felt like a wild, untamable thing just out of reach. But as Zara's words echoed in his mind, he focused, trying to bend it to his will. He let the hunger flood his senses, felt it spread through his veins like fire, and for a moment he was lost in it. But then he remembered Zara's words, "Don't let it control you, star." With a sharp mental focus, he directed the hunger, willing it to calm, to shift. Slowly, the fire inside him began to subside, becoming a steady, powerful force, humming with potential. He opened his eyes and Zara was watching him, her expression unreadable. Well done, she said, her voice approving. You've made the first step. The hunger is no longer something that controls you. It's something you can direct, something you can use. John smiled, a thrill of satisfaction running through him. He had done it. He had learned to control the hunger, to make it bend to his will. And he knew that this was only the beginning. We're ready, Zara said softly, her hand sliding into his. Now we take the next step. John looked at her, and for the first time since meeting her, he felt no hesitation. The hunger had become a part of him, a part of them both, and together they were unstoppable. The future was wide open, filled with limitless potential, and they would take it all. Hand in hand, they walked out of the house, ready to claim their place in the cosmos. Together they were a force like no other, bound by hunger, driven by desire, and unstoppable in their quest to conquer everything. And the universe trembled in anticipation. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.